Share. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Excellent. All right. So this is chapter 8, and we're going to be talking about interference, remote and automatic operation, and prohibited transmissions. So interference, and you will hear um, one of my one of my pet peeves. Kind of makes me crazy. Um, because I don't understand it. Probably someone could explain it to me someday if I asked. But the rules say we're not allowed to use codes like 10 codes that the police use, or, we're not allowed to disguise our message in any way. But we use Q codes all the time. If you're doing any monitoring, people are using Q codes all the time. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Isn't that a rule? So don't quite understand it, but be a good idea for you to just look up Q codes. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's something in the book about, like the 20 most common Q codes or something that are used. But if not, just do a quick Google search on amateur radio Q codes, and it'll bring them all up for you and tell you what QRN means. Well, it means static. Um, and that'll just help you out, because until I knew that was there, until I made that for myself, that printed off that sheet for myself, people would say QSL, QSL, yeah, QSL. And I'm like, what's all this QSL? That means I understand. Um, and so um, back to interference, static. It's natural interference, caused by thunderstorms or other atmospheric type conditions. There's man-made static, and that's appliances in your house or in your neighbor's house. If you're too close to power lines, high power lines, you could have some static created. QRM, it's interference that's caused by other signals. It can be from transmitted signals and can be created internally by a receiver. Um, Harmful interference is interference that is disruptive, but not necessarily willful. Um, as an example, potentially a bad example, but interference, where as soon as you push that button to talk on your microphone, you're potentially causing interference. Why do I say that? Because when I push that button to talk, Bob might also be pushing that button to talk. And Bob may have pushed just a second before me, but I got more power and I'm closer to the repeater than Bob is. So I win. And we call that getting stepped on in amateur radio. So if someone says you doubled with someone or you got stepped on by someone, that's what they mean. Two people tried to transmit at the same time, and usually there's only one winner. Every once in a while, you'll hear two people at the same time, and I don't quite understand how that happens, but I just heard it happen last week and went, what? How did that happen? So, but usually one person wins, and it's just called getting stepped on. And that is really a form of interference. It's not willful because it's not intentional. So it's okay. You're not going to get in trouble for doing that. But if you do it, it's always nice to apologize. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there, Bob. Go ahead. I hear I stepped on you, so go ahead and give your call sign. Come on in. And so, um,
Mike, there's
yeah,
if I can interject a little bit, there are two bands that actually we have an agreement that the amateurs are not supposed to interfere with the primary users of the band, and you won't be able to get to them until you get your generals. But there's the 30-meter band, which is 10 megahertz, and
yeah, we talked about that last week.
okay, because I was operating on 10 megahertz using that computer aided thing, the FT8, and there was a voice. Some guy was transmitting, and I was wondering, should we stop transmitting because we're not supposed to interfere with the lawful users of the band. This is a sort of interference-free type of agreement we got. Oh, okay, back to you.
All right, and the answer there, in case anybody's wondering, the answer is yes. You really should, because we're not supposed to interfere with them. So you really should, because they got the primary. All right, and when you're causing interference, the best you can do is try to avoid it. Sometimes it'll be different things that you're doing, like um, if you're kicking out a lot of power. We talked a little bit about power last week too. One of the things that you're supposed to do as an amateur is use as little power as you need. So if you can make your contact with 5 watts, but your radio has 100 watts, you should not be using 100 watts. Um, Part of the reason for that is that much power, it has, if you think of it from a visual standard, it has width to it. And so that width is going to potentially bleed into the frequencies next to you. And so I've been on HF channels where I was doing POTA and I'm on a clear channel, and all of a sudden I'm almost hearing someone talking. And I tune, a couple of kilohertz up, and there's that person. They're just kicking so much power out that they're bleeding over into my frequency. Now, what do you do? I could say, "Hey, turn your power down. You're bleeding over here." I could be stupid and just go over there and yell at them, but that's not what you do. I just moved over a couple more kilohertz to the other direction, and I was clear of them. All good. Everybody's happy. No problem. But if you don't need the power, don't use the power. And that's one of the ways you can deal with and avoid causing some of the harmful interference. Willful interference, on the other hand, is intentionally causing interference. Um, Bob and I, when we first came on, were just finishing a conversation when Ace came in on our Sunday night 2 meter um, net that we run every Sunday night at 9 o'clock. Hope to see you guys there in a couple of weeks when you get your licenses. Um, with this one guy that I know, his name is Joe, and Joe, every time Joe keyed up, and there were some questions going back and forth. So normally in a net, you get to check in, and then you shut up for a while, and net control then Eventually, you get in line. Net control gives you the mic. You say what you need to or want to say, and then you're done in the net for the rest of the time. Now you're just listening and you're getting information and you're maybe learning stuff along the way. Um, every once in a while in a net, the net controller will have questions or things for the person who just talked. And so they'll have a little conversation back and forth. And every time Joe keyed up, I heard on my radio, Bob didn't notice it, but I heard somebody going, blah, 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 blah. Or, oh, really? How interesting. And they were really quiet, but I could hear them trying to key over, the person who was talking. Maybe they didn't have enough power. I was really confused as to what was going on there, but it only happened when Joe keyed up. Nobody else did it deal with. So I'm thinking that someone was doing some willful interference and trying to mess with Joe as Joe transmitted. Don't do that. If you don't like someone and you don't want to hear them, shut your radio off. Go to a different station. Do something else. Um, in a net, they're only going to talk less than 3 minutes. I mean, some of our long-winded people like me will go about, 2 minutes, and I that's a long time, I think. Um, um, but you don't have to listen to them long; they'll be gone soon. So if you don't like the person, just find a way to deal with it. But it's quite illegal to do willful interference. You can get fined, you can lose your equipment, all kinds of bad stuff can happen with you. So, not a good idea to do. And I was the only one that heard it, apparently. Maybe. I've only talked to Bob about it. Um, but if 10 other people heard it, 10 other people got annoyed by that harmful interference. So you may be doing it to make Joe mad, but I'll tell you what, Joe didn't even know it was done. The person who's talking has no idea that you're causing harmful interference. Everybody else gets to hear it. So there's no point in doing things like that to cause harmful interference. So don't do it. Um, yep. And there are people out there, there's procedures to deal with finding the people. Um, doesn't happen much, but they do. We heard a couple of weeks ago, I think it was Jerry told us about some guy who got like a 15 grand fine, but then died before he had to pay. Um, so it does happen. All right, preventing interference. Use common sense and courtesy. Um, know how to operate your equipment to reduce generated and received interference. Sometimes we are causing interference and we don't know it. Um, a lot of the interference we cause, you can know, you can check. There are people in the hobby that have equipment that will help you. Hey, I just put up a new antenna. Can you come over and check me out and make sure I'm not doing anything bad? That my SWR is good, but that's all I can check. That's all the equipment I have. People will help you. If you don't know you're causing harmful interference, but you are, you're gonna make people mad. Um, so know your equipment, know how to operate your equipment, know what you got, know what you're doing. Um, no one owns a frequency. That's true and untrue. Um, there are there is one time where someone owns a frequency, and that's during an emergency. During an emergency, whoever's having the emergency has the frequency, and you clear out of their way. Um, when there's a scheduled net or a scheduled activity that the repeater owner has approved for that slice of time, technically, those people own that net or own that frequency. Um, Sometimes, I run a net on second and fourth Tuesday of the month for Warren Cert, and every once in a while, these guys talk every Monday night on the frequency as I'm listening, getting ready for the net, and usually they're done by 8 o'clock. But sometimes at 8:20 they're still talking. So I'll just call my call sign out, and that will let them know I would like to interject in the conversation, and they'll pause and ask, invite me into the conversation. I'll just say, hey, just so you know, there's a net starting in 10 minutes on this frequency for Warren Cert. And they'll go, oh my gosh, yep, we know. Okay, yep. We didn't realize it was this late. We'll clear out of here by 8:30 for you, no problem at all. I mean, that's what everybody does, because everybody knows. You be polite, you be courteous. Um, if you want to continue your conversation, that is okay. Just do it on a different frequency. Um, Sometimes, and they have a plan B. Um, Sometimes you'll say, hey, so and so, I'm gonna be driving home from work tomorrow, and I got my radio in my car now, so maybe we can talk on that repeater on the way home. Yeah, okay, let's do that. So I get out at 4:30, so I'll meet you there. Well, you get there at 4:30, and someone's already having a conversation on that repeater. Well, it's not yours, even though you planned it. So have a plan B. Say, hey, let's go to this repeater. But if that's in use, let's go to that repeater. Or interject into the conversation, let them know you're going to meet someone there, and then say, hey, so and so, you're there, good. Let's meet over on this channel instead. Let's meet Simplex, or let's meet someone. People will are really good about helping you. And some people will even go, oh, you know what? We'll just move. Don't worry about it. You guys can stay here. People have been so very courteous to me. So let's keep this new generation of hams being courteous also, and just you know figure it out and continue to have fun. Recognize special operations and special circumstances, which I already talked about. The control point, uh, where the control operator function. The control point is where the control operator function is performed. It's not necessary at the physical transmitter, or not necessarily at the physical transmitter. Local control, the operator is at the transmitter. Remote control, and you'll notice, these three words here that I'm giving you: control point, local control, remote control. Those are all stuff that's going to be on the test. Um, um, so there's I think there's multiple questions for these. Um, so the remote control, the control point is linked to the transmitter by a control link, which could be a telephone, a radio, or the internet. Automatic control functions are operated by circuitry to ensure proper operation. That's in, well, let's look here. Automatic control, the operator is always required, is responsible for proper operation. Repeaters, auxiliary stations, space stations, and beacons may operate under automatic control. Just as an example, the Hazel Park Amateur Radio Club's repeater, the HPARC, um, it on the maybe on the quarter hour, it every once in a while announces itself. It says its call sign. Sometimes it does it with Morse code. Sometimes it's a person's voice saying, "Hey, thanks for using the Dart repeater. This is W8HP." And that's all recorded and controlled by a computer that every once in a while, on a timer, kicks it off and does it. So that's what that automatic control does, and it helps to keep everything working correctly. Um, the repeater is supposed to announce itself, or the auxiliary station, or the space station, or the beacon. You know, part of amateur radio is you gotta, um, you gotta give your call sign. And so, in keeping legal, it needs to do it. And if you're not going to have somebody picking up the microphone every 10 minutes, got to do it automatic.
Hey, Mike, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So I was working at a road rally a couple weeks ago, and we had a net system set up. They go out with a camper out in the middle of the woods and set this thing up, and the repeater was doing that automated. Every 10 minutes it would tell everybody what it was. But what I found interesting is, like I was working at the start of stage 10. We had a start radio, we had a finish radio. When these guys would call in, they weren't using their call sign, they were using start 10 or finish 10. And I was wondering how that works as far as
We will get into that in just a few minutes.
perfect.
All right. It's coming up. Stay tuned. All right. Prohibited transmissions, unidentified transmissions. So you always have to identify. You can't just get on and talk and go away. Nope. You must identify. You must use your call sign. And like the rule says, every 10 minutes and at the end of your transmission. Now, a lot of people do it at the beginning of their transmission. But as long as they're doing it, if it's a conversation that's going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, a lot of people do it at the beginning of their transmission. And that's just because it's easy to remember. When you're going away, that's what they mean by the end of your transmission. So you're saying goodbye, everybody, 73 to you. I'm out. This is November 8, Victor Delta Zulu, and I'll be clear. That's the end of my transmission. So it's not the end of my turn in this conversation that I need to do it. It's every 10 minutes during the conversation, and then when you say goodbye. So every 10 minutes and at the end. Using a false or deceptive signals, can't do that. Must, everything's got to be, we're being honest, we're being truthful, we're not trying to deceive people, we're not trying to, so like using someone else's call sign is illegal. False distress or emergency signals. It's like we all know, don't dial 911 just to see if it works. Don't dial 911 just to have some fun and watch the ambulance come and say, well, I didn't call 911. Now that's jail. Same thing here. Don't do fake distress or emergency signals. Fake calls for help. Obscene or indecent speech. We do not swear or do any indecent topics. There are, I don't know, I don't think there's an age for amateur radio, and I know that there are at least junior high kids that have their licenses, and potentially even younger. One of our club members, Michelle, I think she got her license early in high school. So she was still a teenager. So we don't, we try to be PG at the worst. But I say go G. If you go G, you're safe. Um, up to interpretation type conversations. And this is one that the club is kind of having a debate over right now, at least a couple of us are. And that's because on the club's repeater, there was a heated discussion. One guy was egging another guy on about the presidential campaign. And one of the members says, well, you can't do that. That's illegal. And they went, wait, where is it illegal? Oh, it's in Part 97. It's not. I have read through Part 97 over the last week completely. It is not in there. But there is some stuff that could be lightly interpreted to match this last bullet point. Whoops. To match that last bullet point there. So it's just smart to avoid, controversial subjects. Um, some of the things that the interpretation is, it talks about not lying and not deceiving. And the old joke of how can you tell when a politician is lying? When his lips are moving. And so, there's a lot of stuff on both sides of the aisle that are really not true. But people don't tend to research. And when you do research because you heard something, and I want to make sure that that's really true, and you do research and all you can find is other people talking about it, so you found 15 or 20 different people that confirm that this really happened. Well, I believe it. It still may not be true. And so that's where the problem kind of fits in is, you know, there's some lies going on that people don't really know are lies, but want to believe that it's true because it's about the opponent that I don't like. So I'm going to talk more about it. But the opponent that you don't like, there's somebody else on the radio who likes that opponent and knows what you're saying is a lie. So it's a problem. So it should be avoided. We shouldn't talk politics. We shouldn't talk religion, and probably some other stuff we shouldn't talk on the radio, but it's not really a rule. The federal government, the FCC won't come down on you, but you'll probably make enemies. And that's not what you want to do on amateur radio. There's so many nice people out there. I don't want to make enemies out of any of them. And I hope you find the same thing. You're not allowed to play music. And every once in a while, you'll be flipping through your radio and you'll see something. Oh, there's a signal right there, and you'll go to that signal and someone is playing music. That's willful interference. That's against the rules. You can't do it. No commercial communications. So
I have a question.
What's that?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So playing music, does that cover commercial? I would take it to mean like commercial music, obviously, like stuff you do on the radio, but does that also cover like, say you're in a band and you're playing music with your friends, and you wanted to share it with somebody else? Does that fall under that harmful interference as well?
Yes. My understanding is yes.
Okay. I was just curious.
Yep. And it has nothing to do with Well, some of it has to do with copyright law, but most of it has to do with we are amateurs, we are not commercial. And WRIF and ABX and WJR and those professional stations, they are making money to play that music. And so if you want your music to go over the airstreams, you got to go through them. That's how I had it explained to me because I had the exact same question actually. Um, Advertising ham radio gear is okay as long as it's not your regular business. So I make antennas. I don't make them for a living. And I don't make them so that I can sell them. But I have a bunch of antennas behind me. A lot of them you can't even see in my room. Um, just because I like making them, I like testing them, I like seeing what I can do. And so I make it, I use it for a while, and then I research a different antenna. So that antenna comes down and a new one goes up. And then I research a different one, and that antenna goes down and a new one goes up. So I got a bunch of, I was starting to think about selling some of these ones I got. So I can do that. I just can't make a regular habit of it. I'm just trying to get rid of some of my junk, is all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to make a career out of it. You may not use ham radio on behalf of your employer. And I think, Jerry, I'm not sure if we did in this class or not, but I'll do it again anyway.
Sure.
Jerry had brought up, a guy, in who owns a company here. Oh, I brought this up last week, I think. Company called Hero Tech that I know, Japanese company, but they have a office here. They build fluid power lines for the big three. And if they're trying to get some information quickly, but there was something happened and all their phone lines are down over there, if they offer me $1,000 to get on my radio and talk to the ham over there that works for Hero Tech, they'll give me $1,000 if I can have this conversation and give this guy this information. I cannot do that. That's illegal. And it says on behalf of your employer. That's one. On behalf of any employer, you can't. Except if you're a teacher. You're a high school teacher, a college teacher, whatever you are, your profession is you're a teacher. And in the second semester, in part one of the second semester, you're going to teach the folks about amateur radio. Well, wait a minute. I'm a ham and I'm teaching about amateur radio and I'm getting paid. Is that illegal? No. There's a provision for that. There's also provisions if you have a job in emergency management for the county or the hospital, and they do drills. And during that drill, you're going to be getting paid, but you got to use your radio to do it. There's an exception there. For those people, they have a time limit. They're only allowed to do that so many days a year. So they can't do it. They can't run 12 drills a year. They can only run like 2 or 3 maximum. And then they can't anymore unless they do it volunteer. So no encrypted transmissions are allowed. Encryption means deliberately encoding the information for transmission in order to hide or obscure the message. In this day and age, we encrypt a lot of stuff on our computers to send things across. Things like text messages are not encrypted. So and this is everybody listening, I hope, in case you don't know this, when you send your text to your friend, anybody with the right equipment can grab that and read it. So be aware, text messaging is not secure. I just ran into somebody last week that didn't know that. They were sending passwords. It's like, you're doing that on text? What's wrong with you? Why? Why not? So be aware. But we have other ways of encrypting things and sending them electronically so that someone can get that transmission, but it's gibberish to them without the keys. We cannot do that in amateur radio with a few exceptions. They're only allowed for radio control or space station control. So radio control, so no one else can take over, whatever you're trying to control with that radio. Space station control, let's say you want to do something with your space station, you want to make an adjustment somewhere, but you don't want anybody to adjust the trajectory of your space station. You don't want somebody to shut your space station down for you. So we're allowed to encrypt there so that people can't grab those codes and then have the keys to your kingdom in space. So, but those are the only exceptions. No broadcasting. Broadcasting is sending one-way transmissions to the general public. That's what professional radio is for. We are amateurs. Okay? So no news, no music. The only exceptions there are if you're practicing Morse code, you can send some practice Morse code and not really be sending it to anybody, not expecting a response. It's code practice. And you're allowed so much time. And I don't do code yet. That's one on my short list of things to learn. And but apparently, there's time limits on how much and how long, but you can practice without that. Ham radio related bulletins are another thing that you're not expecting responses back from. And bulletins are a lot of times where I've used bulletins is during like an emergency drill. The state will send out a bulletin in that drill. The scenario is, the temperature's been, over 3 digits, over 100 degrees for 16 days now. And all the power that's being used for air conditioning is overtaxing the system, and the infrastructure is failing because of it. And so we run this drill, and as we're running this drill, the state will send out bulletins to let us know what the current situation is. This is now not working. That's now not working. These people need this or need that. So bulletins can go out without, which are one-way transmissions. They're not expected for anybody to respond. Everybody's just expected to get them, write them down, and know and pass that information on to whoever needs it. Retransmission of space station control communications are also exceptions to that rule. All right, special circumstances. Emergencies and critical situations create special circumstances. We already talked about that a little bit when I said no one owns the frequency. Well, maybe not, because the special circumstances that I talked about are when someone kind of does. You should be off it, not causing any harmful interference at all. You should be out of their way unless you're helping. If you can help in the emergency, then pick up that microphone and transmit. If you cannot help, you should be radio silent until the emergency is over. Special events may qualify. Let me go back to this for just a minute, just because this is important. If an emergency is going on, even if it's an emergency drill, if they're in an emergency state and that emergency comes up and you're in a conversation with somebody else, radio silence starts now. You can't say, okay, well, we were in a conversation, and so give me just a second so I can tell my buddy what frequency to move to. Hey, Joe, move to. No. When the emergency happens, you're radio silent. Okay. Special events may qualify as special circumstances. Those are a lot of drills that we run, and nets also create special circumstances. They're short. Sometimes drills go longer. When I was at Monroe a couple of months ago for the Fermi 2 recertification, that was 3 different days, and we went a minimum of 4 hours each day. So sometimes they're long, sometimes they're short, but they happen. And when they're going on, you just got to find someplace else to go. If you don't want to play in that, if you don't want to listen to that, you want to just talk to your other friends, you just got to find a new place to go and go there. Long as you can talk, you can still have the same conversation. So it doesn't matter what frequency you're on. Just got to find a way to communicate to each other outside of radio to find out where you're going to go. Normal rules then return when the situation turns to normal. So when the net ends, when the drill ends, or the actual emergency ends, everything's fair game. You can do whatever you want, back to whatever again. All right. So I thought in here that, okay, somebody asked a question. I can't remember what it was now, and I thought it was covered in here. What did somebody ask a few minutes ago?
It was about tactical
Oh,
call
yes.
signs.
Yes. So tactical call signs are they are legal, but you still have to follow the amateur rules. So if you're on an amateur radio, we do this in CERT a lot. I have 15 people, and for Warren CERT, I'm in charge of communications. So I have people, the leadership team has put people in different locations. And now I'm going to communicate with them, and they're going to communicate with me as comms. That's my tactical call sign, comms. We sometimes are using amateur radio and sometimes not. When I'm not using amateur radio, we're on our 800 radios or something else. It's not strictly amateur. I just use comms, and that's good. And everybody else uses the street or restaurant location that they're stationed at. So if I get somebody at Olive Garden and they're stopping people from leaving Olive Garden and entering onto Van Dyke because Van Dyke is closed for the time being, they will say, comms, this is Olive Garden. For other events, they will give people, maybe give people numbers, A1, B1, C1, or A1, A2, A1, B2, C, whatever. They'll give them a number of their choice for their rationale. If they're on an amateur station, though, they still are supposed to be following the rules. Every 10 minutes, they need to give their call sign, their amateur radio call sign. So every 10 minutes, I would say, this is N8VDZ as comms for Warren Cert. Now I'm legal. If they weren't doing that, then they were not following the rules. And if someone got pissy over it, they could, attempt to get them in trouble. Me personally, if someone's doing that, I totally get it. Because when you're caught up in the keeping people safe business during an event, sometimes that's just hard to remember. And I know that I have failed to do it every 10 minutes. I do it, but sometimes that 10 minutes goes by and I look at my, because how I do it is I set my stopwatch, my on my phone I have a like a stopwatch, and I just start it when I first log in and just pay attention when 10 minutes has gone by. Oh, there's another 10 minutes, say your call sign. Oh, there's another 10 minutes, say my call sign. Oh, it's been 23 minutes. Whoops. So I know I've been guilty of it too. Now, are you sure they were on amateur radio?
Yeah, it definitely was. Yep, because I was even following them with my little handheld radio, so I could hear everything they were saying.
Okay. So sometimes that just happens. I know with GMRS, you're supposed to also, no, I'm sorry, business class radios, you're also supposed to, but I think for business class, it's every 15 minutes. And that's a shared call sign for everybody on the frequency. So someone just has to say the call sign every 15 minutes.
Yeah, and like I was saying, the repeater is telling you its numbers all the time, so it's doing its 10-minute thing. But with cars going 100 miles an hour, and we've got crowd control and things like that, and we've got 30 radios going, it's probably better that they don't do this every 10 minutes.
Yeah, probably, but I don't make the rules. Like I say, I understand how that can happen and why it happens, but it, you know, if I don't know who's going to get in trouble. Well, who would get in trouble is everybody who's transmitting if they're not doing it. Every single person can get in trouble, and I don't know if they would blanket that with an organization. Hey, you guys were all doing this. You were in charge of it. Why didn't it happen? I don't know what the FCC would do. But
yeah, I mean they run these races almost every weekend, so they've probably got a variance of some sort.
Oh, really? I thought when you said race, I was assuming it was this summer for the Grand Prix.
No. These are off-road rallies, so they run them through the woods.
Are you sure they're legal? And why I say that is the reason I got my general, I still wasn't playing amateur radio when I got my general. I was using my license twice a year for Warren Cert. I had no idea there were nets. I had no idea there was an amateur community. I had no idea I could build my own antenna. But my brother-in-law, who he used to do a lot of off-roading with his Hummer, rock climbing and off-roading kind of stuff. And he was in a little club, and they had some radio communications issues with their family radios they had. So they all decided they were going to get amateur radios. And so my brother-in-law, knowing I had my license, said, "Hey, if I'm using it for this, do I need a license?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know you're only using it for that, but just like for warrant cert, use it twice a year, but I still had to get my license or the FCC can nail you." I said, "Okay, well, how do I get my license?" So I went and did the class with him for technician while I studied for my general, just to spend time with my brother-in-law. Then after he got his license, he found out that everybody else got their radios, but were not going to get their licenses. That's too much time and work. How are they going to know? Well, my brother-in-law was an Eagle Scout. He's a really good guy. He's not a goody-goody, but he likes to play within the rules. And so he found a new club. Didn't want to play with them anymore because they're all breaking the rules. Even though he isn't, they are, and he just couldn't deal with that. So there is potential that no one has their license, and that's why you didn't hear call signs.
Yeah, so these guys have been working for about 40 years doing this. They all have license. I talked to all of them that were near me, so they are
Oh,
ham
okay.
operators. But yeah,
Huh.
I'll find out more as I get more into it, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, and I've never heard of the FCC saying, "Yeah, you don't have to give your call sign. It's okay." I've never. I mean, it's definitely possible, I guess, but
I will ask that specific question next time I go.
yeah, yeah, and if you can share that, I'd be interested because if someone else has that question, I'd I'd like a more educated answer.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, so usually I pepper the questions through, um, but this time I decided that it was going to be, a quick chapter, and so I thought, well, I'm just going to go through this, and then I will, we'll just go through, a bunch of these questions. I think there's only like 25 questions for this whole section. So we'll just go through these and see the actual words and get the actual answer and try to get a little more. Let me ask this real quick. Are we all taking practice exams?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right. Yep, because those will help you greatly along the way. And like we've said before, when you're, eventually you'll get into a click and you'll notice that all of a sudden you're getting 80%. I know when I was doing it, I was getting 40, 50%, 40, 50%, 40, 50%, 40, 50%, 40, 50%, 40, 50%. And then all of a sudden it jumped up to 85, 90% every time. So for me, it went in a click and might do that for you too. So don't get discouraged. Just keep doing them. Because I know I was getting really discouraged. I thought there's no way I'm going to get my tech. And then all of a sudden, oh, wait, I'm passing these now. Hey, I'm passing them all the time now. Hey, this is great. So don't get discouraged. It'll get there. All right. So when may an amateur station transmit without a control operator? That's never. Who must and if we're going through these questions, if something wasn't covered well enough, stop me and we'll talk about it. If you got a question about it, what must designate the station control operator? And that's the station licensee who designates the station control operator.
I've actually had a question since the end of the module.
Go ahead.
Is obviously 9/11 was a really obvious example of an emergency where hams were able to step in. That being said, like what or who designates an emergency in an emergency situation? Because I know different things could probably fall under an emergency situation. Is there like a defined committee or something that like sets these out?
There's a couple of ways it can happen. It can actually come down from the president of the United States, or um, it can actually down, from us as hams. We have the National Weather Service, especially in here in Michigan. Um, the National Weather Service gives classes that I highly recommend called Skywarn. And Skywarn teaches you about the different clouds that can cause bad storms and potentially turn into tornadoes. And if you're on your cell phone and you go to the weather and you look and you have a warning and it says, tornado warning, and it's in your county and it's from this time to that time, and then it'll give a report, 1 inch hail and, you know, potential high winds. And then at the bottom of that, it will say either something about this information comes from radar, and that means the National Weather Service sitting somewhere looked at their radar screen and saw rotation in that cloud. Or in that same warning, it'll say visually spotted or something along those lines. And that means someone like me saw the hail, actually got a measurement of the hail. Yeah, it's about golf ball sized. They want different terms. They try to give you different ways because an inch isn't always an inch when you're just looking at something. People miscalculate an inch all the time. And so, but everybody knows what a golf ball size is. So when they teach you, they try to teach you to give, things with, different common objects. So at the bottom of that, if it said, visually spotted or something like that, that means, someone like me saw the 1 inch hail and I picked up my radio or I picked up my telephone or whatever, and I called a certain number with the National Weather Service and reported what I saw. Now they changed their watch to a warning because I saw and reported. And now the people, if the storm is moving from, west to east, the people to the east of me now have a much better warning because us Skywarn people, us spotters, have seen something. Now, at the same time, every county has an amateur radio public service corps. Again, we're all volunteers because we can't get paid. And we run things like Skywarn nets. When the weather's looking bad in Macomb County, every county has their own rules for when a Skywarn net can start. In Macomb County, we're allowed to start our Skywarn net when we deem necessary. We're boots on the ground, or maybe we just want to train. So when it happens, we're ready. But we're boots on the ground. If we see it happening and the conditions are right, we're going to start a Skywarn net. And when it goes to warning, we're then saying, hey, it went to warning. Everybody on this frequency that can hear my voice get to cover. This is what's going on. And so we do our own thing that way. Now, things like a tornado that actually goes through somewhere. Let's talk about the hurricanes that just went through Florida and the Carolinas. The amateur radio community got lots of applause because they had done practice, they had done drills, they were ready. And communications happened all over all 3 states. So those groups and individuals, we don't self-deploy because that we don't, that's a big rule in emergency management. You don't self-deploy, but whoever's in charge of your emergency group, whether it be a CERT team or an ARPSC team, the leaders of that will deploy you. We start the nets, we get things going. If we want to check on situations, a tornado went through, we're going to help the police and fire with what's going on where. They're going to be pretty taxed pretty immediately, but we do a lot of training so we can go out and, I'm, Warren Cert. I'm specifically trained to enter a building that has been damaged from a tornado or earthquake or flood, and trained to be able to judge whether that building is safe to enter or not, and then how to search it for either injured people or victims. And then how to mark that building as searched or as safe to not enter or not safe to enter. So different organizations,
Mike,
kind of deploy in different ways.
Mike, can I jump in?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're giving a really good description of the kinds of things that our particular groups do, and some of the specialties like the building inspections and things of that sort. The thing is, the government has set up a system. It's called the Incident Command System.
Yes.
Which somebody is going to take charge of the whatever is happening, the tornado hit, touchdown, or something of that sort. The incident commander will probably be someone who has authority, like a police commissioner, a fire commissioner, or something like that, and he will deploy. He will make decisions about who gets deployed where. And we as hams have our communications function. There are other people who get into the thing. I know that like the Salvation Army and the Red Cross will deploy, and they'll do whatever the incident commander tells them to do. I know that there's a group, I think it's run by a Baptist organization, and they're very good at 2 things. They're good at feeding people, and they're good with chainsaws, cutting trees and things of that sort that are interfering with roads or power
The
lines.
essential life skills, chainsaws and feeding people.
Exactly. Exactly. But there's, one of the things, and I'm sure Mike has already given you a couple of plugs for it, but get into the ARPSC or ARES, depending on who really controls the manpower. There are courses that FEMA gives out free. One of them is IC 100, which is the Incident Command System. It sort of gives you a view of where you are, where your duty is when the incident commander steps in. And there's different levels of incident commanders. someone handling a local tornado is going to have just authority over, say, the county. Someone who's handling a hurricane is probably about 4 or 5 steps or levels above that, depending on the severity of the incident. Does that pretty much explain things to you? Ace,
Pardon?
does that explain it to you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I was explaining to my partner the chainsaws and feeding people comment.
Yeah, well, I mean that's their department. Our department is communications, or
Yeah.
Yeah, and let me also say this. You know, when the emergency happens, and the so let me just step one step back further. You mentioned ICS. If you're interested in being helpful with emergency management, you mentioned ICS 100. I recommend 100, 200, 700, and 800. They're all about incident management, and they're all free. They're all open book, and they're all about, I think I spent an hour on each one, reading the material and taking the test. So they're not terribly painful, but it's really good information. And let me also say that as an amateur radio operator, you show up at an emergency and you don't really belong to any organization, let's say. You know, let's say you just got your license, but you want to help and you haven't had time to join any AIR, PSC, or CERT or anything. But gosh, I got my license. Maybe I can help. And you show up and you say, hey, I got my license. Here, let me show you my license. I also have, you know, a radio I brought with me because I wanted to be prepared for emergency. So I got, you know, radio with me, and I'm ready to transmit whatever you need. I can help. And they may say, okay, I'm going to put you over with the Red Cross. And the Red Cross may ask you to send messages here and there. Or the Red Cross may say, we need these boxes stacked over there. And that's okay. You're helping. Don't, there have been some hams in history that have got their nose bent because, well, I got my license to be a amateur radio operator, and I went there to help, and all they had me do is move boxes. Why did I even show up? Well, you showed up so you could help. Isn't that why you showed up? So you could help? So don't be offended if that's the job that they need done and that's the job they give you. They may not have any messages to send through the radio, may not be needed. Phones may not be down, or there may be another amateur that got there an hour before you. So, but it's all good as long as you're helping. If you're getting in the way, that's a whole different animal. But so those 4 courses are IS 100, 200, 700, 800. And if you simply Google FEMA space IS 100, IS space 100, it'll take you right to that class. And same with 200, 400, 700, 800. Or not 400, 100, 200, 700, 800. Mm-hmm. Same Google search will work the same for all those. And like I say, they're free. All righty. Any other questions before we move on? All right, we will move on. What is an amateur station's control point? And it's the location at which the control operator function is performed. What determines the transmitting frequency privilege of an amateur station? And that's the class of the operator license held by the control operator. Now, one of the things that we covered lightly and I wanted to cover heavier, and so I'll do that right now. Any one of you guys are at my house, let's say. You do not have your technician license yet. You have not tested. You are not licensed. I can make you the control I can make you the operator. I'm sorry. Yeah, I can make you the control operator. I can hand you the microphone and you can talk. It's called third party. We did this. We do this every year at Field Day. Have a station set up for people without licenses so they can get on the air. Get on the air. Go to. Amateur radio does a lot of that on the air, and it's something on the air. Get on the air is the station that's set up at Field Day. POTA, Parks on the Air. I go to a national park with my radio and I try to make connections to anybody I can all over the world for POTA. And it's logged a special way and I get points a special way and people hunt for POTA activators. And if I talk to 10 different people, I've activated the park, which is kind of cool. But back to where I was, you can be the control operator as I'm the licensee and I designate you. Another place we've done that is at a Detroit high school. We set up antennas and radios at the school. I think it was 15 kids, high school kids, all got to come up with a question each. And we contacted the International Space Station. And so each one of those kids became third party. I handed them the microphone and they got to talk to that astronaut up on the space station and ask them a question. And then the astronaut answered back live. So it was pretty darn cool. And so third party is something that we do quite often, and it is legal as soon as I leave the room. You are no longer privileged to talk on the radio. So when you get your license, if someone in your household is interested in trying to talk on the radio, as long as you're sitting right there, you just simply say, whoever you're talking to, say, prepare for third party traffic and hand them the microphone. And they can say whatever they want, talk about whatever they want. They have to follow all the rules. They can't swear. They can't, do any, but, they can have a conversation. They can talk about whatever things they want to talk about to the person you were talking to. Perfectly legal. Within your license. Now I'm an extra. So if you were at my house, you don't even have your license. You could talk on every band and every frequency in the United States band plan. As a technician, if I was still a technician, then you could talk on a limited bands and frequencies, but you still are allowed to do that. When under normal circumstances, may a technician class license be control operator of a station operating an amateur extra band segment? And this is kind of like what we were talking about. with our POTA station, I'm sorry, our GOTA station at Field Day, when the club station, whose trustee holds the amateur extra class license. So at that point, people can talk on our radio as an extra. They can talk all over the world and not even have their license. So it's kind of cool. When can a control operator, oh, I'm sorry, when the control operator is not the station licensee, who is responsible for proper operation of the station? And it's the control operator and the station licensee. So when I hand you that microphone and your third party traffic, I'm still responsible for you. So if you start doing bad things, I need to stop you. So, and that might be just as simple as flipping the power switch. You know, if we're at our go-to station for field day, you know, you never know who you're going to get in there. And so if somebody starts doing bad things, I can just shut the power off and then say, dude, you can't swear like that. Okay, I'll turn the power back on and you can talk some more, but got to keep it clean. And then let them go back and talk again. If you feel comfortable or not. But both are responsible. So they should know the rules before they get the microphone handed to them. And you help them maintain them. Who does the FCC presume to be the control operator of an amateur station unless documentation to the contrary is in the station records? And that's the station licensee. So anything that happens on my station at my house, the FCC is coming for me. So if somebody else gets their license and talks on my radio, they're still going to presume that it's me, possibly. If I have, if my kids are young and I'm at work and they're at home and they turn on my radio and start screwing around, I'm responsible. What do the FCC rules state regarding the use of phonetic alphabet for your station identification in amateur service? I'm not sure that we covered this too well, but the answer is it's encouraged. There are no rules. But if you ever get to run a net, or you'll learn just from doing it, because we log. It's a great idea. It's not required, but it's a great idea to log your transmissions. At this time, on this date, on this frequency, I talk to this license. It's good just to keep a record of that, so you can know, man, I've talked to people all over. I've talked to everybody in the state, in the country. I've got every state down here. Wow, or whatever. But when you're doing that, they're going to tell you your call sign. You're going to tell them your call sign, and sometimes that just isn't heard. So if I just say N8VDZ, you may not get that. But if I say it phonetically, November 8, Victor Delta Zulu, oh, N8VDZ, I got it now. So it's very encouraged, but not a rule. And you can use it all the time. I use my phonetic call sign more than not. Some people do, some people don't. Some people only use their phonetic when they have to. I happen to like November 8, Victor Delta Zulu. I just like the way it sounds. That's me. That's okay. If you don't like yours or you don't want to, you don't have to. Just easier for me. And I feel like people understand what my call sign is better when I do it phonetic. Okay, moving on. When may an amateur station transmit without identifying on the air? And that's when transmitting signals to control model craft. Now, there are other reasons when you can, but of these answers, that is the correct one. When are you required to transmit your assigned call sign? We've heard this a bunch of times, but some people need it locked in still that already have their license, and that's every 10 minutes during and at the end of the communication. What language may you use for identification when operating the phone subband? And that's English. We always identify in English when we're following the US rules. In Canada, I have no idea what the rules are. So it may be in Canada that you're required to do it in French when you're in French Canada. Or
Okay.
maybe you need to do it in both French and English. I don't know. But here, English, just English, English only. What method of call sign identification is required for stations transmitting phone signals? Send the call sign using CW or phone emission. And let me just cover a couple of words there. Not sure we've hit on these. Phone. That made me crazy and it still makes me crazy. Why don't they say voice? Now, it may be because phone is easier to transmit in Morse code than voice is. I don't know. I don't know Morse code. But phone just means voice. You pick up the microphone and you talk, you're doing phone emission. And every time you transmit, you're creating emissions. So you're sending a wave out. So just wanted to make sure that we hit on both of those things because sometimes you struggle on a word and that word can just screw with the whole topic. And for me, phone was something that stuck in the back of my head. What do they mean by phone? What the heck do they mean by phone? Why, what's phone? And I wasn't sure that it meant talking into the microphone. So now you know. And CW is carrier wave or Morse code. CW and Morse code are the exact same thing. Two different names for the exact same thing. Oh, and let me go back to that and just say, if I'm talking, I'm on phone and I'm talking, and let's say I also know Morse code, and I'm talking and I'm talking and I'm talking, and when I get done talking, I want to sip my water. I'll sip my water, and then with Morse code, I'll do my call sign. Perfectly legal. I have identified myself every 10 minutes because that 10-minute time limit had just gone off. So I did Morse code while I got a little drink before we went on with our conversation. So you can do CW while you're talking, apparently, and it's still good. So you can do it either way. How often must you identify with the FCC assigned call sign when using tactical call signs such as race headquarters? And we just talked about that. At the end of each communication and every 10 minutes during a communication. Which of the following self-assigned indicators are acceptable when using a phone transmission. We didn't cover this very much, but we did a little. When you go from technician to general, so we talked about this last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago. When you get your technician license, you have to wait and wait and wait. And, maybe 4 or 5 days later, your license will show up, maybe even longer, depending on how stuff happens. But you have to wait until your license appears in the FCC database. And we talked about that and showed you how to find that. When you have your technician license and you go and take your general exam and you pass, you can immediately speak on a general frequency that you weren't allowed to speak on with your technician license. You don't have to wait. But what you need to do is you need to identify with a slash and AG. G meaning general. When I went to extra, I joined a net that night. And when I checked into the net, I said N8 VDZ slash AE. And everybody knew what that meant. That meant I just got my amateur extra. If they were to look me up, they would see I'm a general because it still says general in the database. But so I could say stroke AE, I could say slant AE, or I could say slash AE. When we're in our car, we might be, we should announce that we're in our car. And so what a lot of people will do is they won't use the stroke, the slant, or the slash, which is kind of a breach in etiquette. You should say N8 VDZ slash mobile or MOB. And that lets everybody know that you're mobile. I'm only going to be on the radio for a few minutes here because I'm driving to the grocery store. So if you want me, get me now. When you're on your base station at home, you just say your call sign and you might say monitoring, or, a lot of people just say their call sign and put the microphone down. And if anybody else is out there that's monitoring, waiting for somebody else to come along, they hear your call sign and they might answer. They might call back and say, "Hey, what's going on, Mike?" But so in this question, stroke, slant, slash, all are good. Which of the following is required when making on-the-air test transmissions? And that's identify the transmitting station. When is willful interference to other amateur radio stations permitted? And that's at no time. Never, ever, 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 ever is it permitted. Which of the following applies when two stations are transmitting at the same time, at the same frequency, interfere with you? Let me reread that. Which of the following applies when two stations transmitting the same frequency interfere with each other? And the stations should negotiate continued use of the frequency. So that, we talked a little bit about that already. When you're supposed to meet your buddy here and you key up and somebody else keys up because they're meeting their buddy here too, then you just talk about it. Either somebody should move or the four of you will now have a conversation. That works too. But often, if I want to talk to my buddy about a specific topic that I need to know information about, I may not want to have a four-way conversation. I need to talk to him. Maybe I'm working on the Hazel Park repeater and there's a problem with it and I'm trying to figure it out. Well, I don't want to have a four-way conversation. I want to talk to my buddy who knows the answer to my question. So we'll go to a different frequency. Say, hey, well, let's just talk for a few minutes. And my buddy shows up, we'll go to a different frequency and let you guys have this one. Just negotiate it out. Be friends. Which of the following restrictions apply when a non-licensed person is allowed to speak to a foreign station using a station under control of a licensed amateur operator? And the foreign station must be a country within the U.S. which the U.S. has a third-party agreement with. And we talked about that last week, I believe, or maybe 2 weeks ago. And there's a place you can look that up on the ARRL.com website, where you can see which stations have third-party agreements with. What is the definition of third-party communication? And that's a message from another control operator to another amateur station control operator on behalf of another person. So third party has two meanings. We covered the third party traffic, which is I don't have a license and you're letting me talk on your radio using your license. But there's also I'm passing a message to another ham and they're going to pass it on behalf of me. Which of the following are required for remote control operation? And all of these are good. The control operator must be at the control point. The control operator is required at all times. And the control operator must identify I can't read. Must indirectly manipulate the controls. Yikes. My tongue checked out, I think. So all of these are correct. All are right. Which of the following is an example of remote control as defined in Part 97? And that is B, operating the station over the internet. Who is accountable if a repeater inadvertently transmits a communication that violates the FCC rules? And that's the control operator of the originating station. Now, we've been talking a little bit about this with the Hazel Park repeater, just with stuff that's happened through history and could continue to happen from time to time with I'll just say with jerks out there. The jerk is the one who's really accountable. But we have a repeater out there. And if someone is abusing that and doing illegal things, we can simply turn it off. A couple of keystrokes and we can shut that thing down. And then 10 minutes later, we'll turn it back on, or 5 minutes later, or however long, we'll turn it back on. And that person has moved on. It's just good neighborly stuff, because no one wants to hear the jerk. And so the repeater owner will often take responsibility for the person that's being bad, but the repeater owner is not going to get fined because somebody was talking on their repeater and swearing all the time. You know, the repeater owner is not going to get fined for that. They're going to find the person that's doing the bad stuff. What, if any, are the restrictions concerning transmissions of language that may be considered indecent or obscene? And be any such languages prohibited? When may an amateur radio operator use their station to notify other amateurs of availability of equipment for sale? And that's when selling amateur radio equipment and not on a regular basis. And let me just say that I'm holding a pen in my hand that I made. I'm a woodworker. One of the things that I enjoy doing is making pens, and I sell them too. But I should not get on the Hazel Park Amateur Radio Club Sunday 2-meter net and advertise that I have pens for sale. Bad call. Don't do it. But I have an antenna that I am not using. Anybody wants it, I'll sell it to them for $20. That's okay. I'm not doing that as a business. In which of the following circumstances may the control operator of an amateur radio station receive compensation for operating that station? And that's when the communication is incidental to classroom instruction at an educational institution. Okay? So like me, Bob, and Jerry, we are volunteers here. We are not getting paid to do this. We do this because we enjoy doing it. We get to meet new people, and we want to build the ham community. So we volunteer. We do this for free a couple times a year. We are not allowed to get paid here. But if I was a school teacher and I wanted to teach a section on amateur radio, I could. When is it permissible to transmit messages encoded to obscure their meaning? Only when transmitting control commands to space stations or radio control craft. And it's basically just because you can't let somebody take your stuff over. Other than that, you can't do encoded messages to obscure the meaning. Can't do it in amateur radio at all. Under which of the following circumstances are one-way transmissions by amateur stations prohibited? And that is broadcasting. So playing music, giving a sermon. I heard that happen once, and I was like, what is going on here? And so I went past that station. I was doing some hunting. I came back. I don't know. A lot of people have scanners that they use. So when a frequency is in use, the scanner will go to that frequency, and then it'll go to the next one, and then it'll go to the next one. I don't use a scanner. I just turn my dial, and I watch the waterfall to see where stuff's happening. And I don't know, probably 20 minutes later, 15 minutes later, I was going back the other way, and I came across that same guy, and he wasn't just talking to somebody about God. He was giving a sermon. He was broadcasting. Not supposed to be done. Under what conditions is an amateur station authorized to transmit music during a phone emission? And that's when incidental to the authorized transmission of manned spacecraft communication. So there might be something going on that spacecraft and you can't control what's in the background and it's coming through.
Mike, it has been the custom for Houston to wake the astronauts up with a blast of music.
Yes, that's right. I'd forgotten it, Jerry. Thank you.
Sure.
Um, so that's that's where that kind of thing is allowed, but only there. What types of amateur stations can automatically retransmit the signals of other amateur stations? And that's repeater, auxiliary, or space stations. How does the FCC define broadcasting for amateur radio services? And that's D, transmissions intended for reception by the general public. So that's another thing you should keep in mind. This is not private. This is public. So if you want to beat somebody up verbally, you want to beat up a third party verbally to your friend, don't do it on the radio because your friend might be listening. Okay. Or somebody might be listening and then tell that friend, wow, they were talking pretty bad about you. If it's private and you hope it stays private, don't do it here. This is all public. Amateur radio is public completely. When may amateur stations transmit information in support of broadcast program production or news gathering, assuming no other means are available? And that's A, when such communications are directly related to immediate safety of human life or protection of property. Now, in this day and age, often we have cell phones. And if the cell phone lines are still up, you wouldn't use amateur radio. You would use your cell phone to pass that information on, whether it be a text, whether it be a phone call, whatever it is. It probably would be faster, especially if life or limb or protection of property is in place. Calling 911 or calling the police department directly will probably get you a quicker response than going through the radio because you got to do third party there. You'll contact somebody on the radio and then they gotta contact police, fire, whoever you need. So keep that in mind too. And it's only when such communications are directly related to the immediate safety of the human life and protection of property. So, all right. And that is all the questions that would be in Module 8. You've gone through every one of them now. Any questions?
Hey, what exactly is that? There's like a FT8. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, FT8 is digital. And let me see if I can turn this on here. So it's digital, and it's sending digital messages back and forth to
think we lost Mike again.
Oh, no.
Oops. Well,
Oh, God.
he's coming back in. Okay. Yeah, I started
Anyhow,
about a month
FT8,
ago,
yeah,
and
FT8 is digital, and it requires not only a radio, it requires a computer. And and Jerry uses it, but I don't. So maybe Jerry should be answering the question.
I was talking it up to Bob. I think he's going to try it. It's it's something that's the computer can detect radio signals that our own ears cannot, and it's really good at it. I've been using it for about a month or thereabouts, and I have been talking. It's kind of boring. It's just a set bunch of messages that you can send and signal strength, but you make contacts all over the world. And
Yeah, can you hear this?
yeah,
All right, I can hear you talk. I can hear you talk, but I can't hear anything in the background, Mike.
you're a little
Oh, what a
buzzing, but
bummer.
you turn the volume up quite a bit.
I hear like a fax machine. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Sounds like we're going to connect to AOL.
it's a
So so that
about
yes, it's that kind of sound. And
mhm.
what happens is for 8 seconds, it listens and decodes the message, and then it switches over to me and I transmit for 8 seconds. And it just goes back and forth and back and forth. Um, I can tell it to not transmit, and it'll just, every 8 seconds listen and decode. Um, but it's uses a computer, like Jerry said, at the same time, and I can type a message in, and the computer software that I use, it gives signal strength, and it gives all of the information about me that I put in there, including a message that I may want to send at the end, have a nice day, 73, whatever. Um, and it's just making contacts with people in a different way. I like to do that when it's evening. My son's bedroom is right next to my ham shack, and so I tend to talk loud. Well, I'm using FT8 or FT4. FT4 is the exact same thing as FT8, only the time is cut in half. So it's shorter segments that it sends and receives. I'll plug in my headphones so that that squealing noise isn't heard, through the room. And actually, you don't even need to listen to it. I could just turn the volume down all the way. But I can still play radio and still contact people all over the world without bugging my family, at 11 o'clock at night. Did that give you what you were looking for? Is there,
Yes, that helps. Thanks a lot.
okay?
Okay,
Other questions?
if you want
Yeah.
me to share, I can show you a screen.
Do it, Jerry.
Okay, let's see. Do I have permission?
Hang on.
I
I
didn't
do
think
now.
about doing that. That's what I should have done. If I'd have been thinking, well, I got to get a cable out. My digital cable's not hooked up right now.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Where is it? Okay. My graph. Here it is. Okay. Screen sharing. All right.
All right.
Do you see this?
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay. These are the stations that are coming through on what is it? 10 megahertz, 10.14 megahertz, and they're coming from all over. You can see USA, Spain, Slovak Republic. Uh, every once in a while, I'll see Japan or Australia set up. And okay, my transmitter is not set for 10 megahertz, but all I have to do is click on the station I want to talk to, and the transmitter will send a bunch of messages like I'm W9NPI. I'm at EN82, which is a grid square in the world. And then he'll send me his signal strength. I'll send that he hears me. I'll send him signal strength that I hear him. And then we say received, 73, best regards, and that's the end of the contact. And okay, I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to
Wait,
show you.
wait, before you stop, Jerry, hold on. Can you go back?
I'll try.
Did you close it?
I closed it, but I can start it up again.
Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I was just going to say that the second column from the left, oh, it's coming back up. Second column from the left where it says dB, decibel, that's telling you your signal strength. And if you're like at negative, if you're beyond like negative 11, chances are you're not going to be able to reach them. Closer to zero is better.
Like this guy
So,
here, yeah, W2MW is at a strength of 23. He's blasting.
yeah, yeah.
And,
So you should be able to reach him no problem at all.
yeah, if you go the machinery won't go beyond a minus 26. That's the relative decibels over I guess the noise floor. So it's very very sensitive. And okay, let me get out of this, and I'll show you a current logbook. Okay, and I have been during the day or at night if I can't sleep, I'll go on the air, and I'm talking to all these guys in different countries all over the place, and it's uh, it's boring because you don't have a chance to chat. But look all the countries I've talked to, and later on I can well, for instance, all
You're
right,
not sharing, Jerry.
I'm not sharing. Whoops. Okay, let me get back to that.
Yeah, we only see your pretty face.
Oh, that the monkeys that steal my coconuts count as a gain. All right, where am I? Okay, share. Okay, okay, and these are all the
There you
stations.
go.
My logging program, like here's F5MXH, uh, F5MXH, and my software will go to a website that pulls out where he is, and if I want more information, I can go to that website qrz.com and go to his. Hopefully, go to his web page. Do you see this QRZ page?
Not
No.
yet. It's still on your logbook.
Okay, let me stop the. All right, where am I? Well, not there.
A lot of good
Good.
countries there. Portugal, Cuba, Spain, Greece, Madagascar, North Macedonia, New Zealand, Namibia,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Bulgaria.
FT8's pretty cool.
Yeah.
it's cool. I don't know if I can get to there from here. Sorry to say. All right.
Oh, good. I'm not the only person who has that problem. Thanks, Jerry. You're my hero.
Okay. I'll have to try to stop sharing if I can. Where am I? Zoom and stop share.
So you don't do any FT8 at all, Bob?
No.
I don't know.
But
We
I'm
talked
I'm
about
I'm
getting some.
you know what, I'm kind of curious now, so I think I'm gonna give it a shot.
So just as a slight example, and well, why not to brag? At field day, I alone ran the FT8s and ran the digital station. And I got the second most amount of points for the whole club. So it's kind of fun, and you can contact a lot of people really quickly. Um, one of my goals is FT8 to every country. And to me, voice to every country is also a goal, but that's not as attainable.
Yeah.
Being 62 years old and just starting that goal, that's not as attainable as I can do it with FT8. FT8, I'm pretty sure I can get that done.
And in the last month, I think I got something 70 or 80 new countries and things of that sort that I haven't contacted in the last 60 years, like India.
Is there a worked all states for FTA?
Say it again.
Is there a worked all states for FTA?
I believe there is.
I gotta expect there is.
I know there is on voice for single sideband, but
Yeah, there's an award for everything.
Yeah, I think the Slovak Republic was had designated a bunch of churches around the country, and if you contacted all these stations, which had a saint designator, you would get some kind of an award, something you can print up on a parchment paper and put on the wall.
like a holy card,
Yes,
Yeah.
holy card. Okay, well,
which you probably don't know what it is unless you went to Catholic school like I did as a kid.
Yeah.
oh yeah. Okie doke. I'm done.
Okay,
I'm gonna stop recording.
Mike, good session.
Yeah.
Mike, good session.
Thank you.